If you would bow your heads in prayer with me, we'll begin. Thank you, Jesus, for a beautiful day and for the privilege that we have to be the church together and also to be informed about the mission and the vision of this great adventure that you've placed us on called Prairie Bible Church. I thank you for all the folks that have been raised up as leaders in our church, for the time, the energy, the passion, the skills, and the talent that they have exhibited for the sake of the gospel. I pray your blessing upon them. I also ask that the anointing of your Spirit would be upon those that will lead us through this meeting today as well, that there might be clarity, and that any questions that people might have, they would be prepared to share them. Because we want to be as simple and authentic and as transparent as we possibly can be for the sake of Christ. We love you, Jesus, and we praise you in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Craig. And as he said, Craig's asking God that you would open up for questions, and I'm going to ask you to make sure you open up for questions. This is truly just a chance for us all to go through this journey of Prairie Bible Church together as we have all along. And we want to just make this an informal discussion. So please, just because I happen to have a microphone, we'll pass the mic around and we will ask questions and discuss as we want to. I kind of like to start with the picture for Rocky's On and for many of us' sake on the right-hand side of a barn. That's kind of our mission. That's our purpose. And we feel God's continued to lead us as we have been born in a barn and we continue that way. We're going to start out with a little bit of celebration of where we've been recently. Give some ministry updates, some other updates in ministry areas of college and things that are going on, some financial update, and then also a building update, which I know many of you have been asking about and are excited about, and we're excited to kind of share some of those details. But I don't want to diminish the celebration part. Basically, they gave me that. That's all I have to do is just the celebration, the fun stuff. And it's really easy, at least from my perspective, to think about where could we be and where are we going to go, and can we get a building, and how can we do this, and what the future is. But as I got quickly prepared for this, just throw some pictures together, it's amazing what we've even done as a church just in the last 3 or 4 months, since right before Easter. And I think it's always important to just take a couple minutes and remember that. The last celebration the last update we had was before Easter. So since that point, we had our Easter celebration, and we had a Holy Week walk. On Palm Sunday, while we were worshiping here, the kids had a Holy Week walk, and they spent the time living out within that 1 hour time what Jesus did for that whole week. Going through Palm Sunday, learning about the cross and what it was. They actually took and washed each other's feet that the kids did in the gym to experience that and to give that servitude of washing each other's feet and serving each other. They read the scriptures of that week and the preparations and the times there, and they even had a Last Supper. They're able to have Last Supper together and go through that experience. Hopefully, maybe many of you have heard this, but if you haven't, I think it's even more important just to show it and see it, and that's what our kids were going through. And next year, if you happen to not see me on Palm Sunday, now you'll know where I am with the kids, because I think it was a pretty awesome experience. Then we as adults tried to do it ourselves a little bit too, and just kind of remember that we were able to go back to the barn on Monday, Thursday, and a Good Friday worship together, a joint service, and have communion together, which is always a great experience. Back to the youth for a second, and what our middle youth group has been doing in the last 3 or 4 months. Generally, they meet once a month, and they've been having anywhere from 12 to 20 4th through 8th graders that are meeting just to learn about Jesus, to be in community, to share things. They've done things like making blankets that they can give as service projects in the community. They've been talking about the cross and making crosses out, all kinds of things. They made T-shirts to represent what they felt, what they were learning that month, and then they wore those shirts to school. So again, it's not just about being there on that Sunday afternoon, but then they're representing Jesus in the schools. Just some other pictures of as they're learning, they're getting into the Bible. I maybe have shared before, some of the students that they're having pulled in there not only had not read the Bible, but they didn't have a Bible. And now they've got a Bible because of Prairie Bible Church. And I'm not sharing that what we're doing, but it's what we're all doing and what you guys are all helping to bring the Bible to these students. And let's face it, they're 4th through 8th graders. They're having a lot of fun. They're eating chicken peeps. They're playing games. And if you can't really tell on the right-hand side, there's baby chicks there that they actually had baby chicks, and they were playing with them. So it's a part about relationship, too. Just last Sunday, The youth group then went to the Toby Mac concert, and there were some parents that organized that up at Jones County Fair. We were able to find a friend that had an old, short little bus, so we were able to pack about 18, 20 people on that bus, drove up to Jones County Fair. They had a great time. You can see the Prairie Bible Church shirts that they'd gotten from Backyard Bible Camp and wore that. And you can see kind of the back right, and the cross, and everybody celebrating there. And a great experience, and again, just kind of getting out in the community too. And none of that would happen without your support and presence there. Again, a lot of things have happened in the last 3 months. If you remember back to June, we had our celebration in the barn where we packed that, I don't remember the numbers, Mark, over almost 200 people. Almost 200 people that came to the barn that day to celebrate in a nice, cool environment. You can see in the picture, we even had about 20 or plus kids that were there. This is a shot of us then standing up. This was the beginning of our charter members at Prairie Bible Church, and that was a big step for us as a church and our commitment and loyalty to one another. As we said, God doesn't care, but it's just a commitment, again, to take that next step of then partnering with the church and the mission of the church. I think definitely the highlight for me and probably for many of us was the baptisms that we had there, baby dedications, and the baptisms that we were able to celebrate and share that day and the awesomeness of what that was, and hopefully it continued of a wonderful tradition of being able to do that every year. And then we had fun, celebrating with food and even driving horses. And I don't know, did anybody get a ride when Hope was driving? Probably good. I don't know if that actually landed well, but she had a great time. And it was great relationship building and fun. And as a plug, hopefully everybody can come out to potluck next week and do the same thing. Backyard Bible Camp last weekend, last Saturday. We shared a video last week in service that Megan shared, so I don't have to get a lot of that. But the kids gathering together to pray, to grow stronger in God through music and what they were doing, playing games, having fun, again, building relationships, and just being able to enjoy each other in a godly experience and knowing that it doesn't have to be separated out was really a great experience that way, and a lot of things going on. So again, I looked at it and kind of thought, well, there's not that much that's gone on. It's been summer. We've been busy doing other stuff. And then all of a sudden you start thinking about it. It's amazing what has happened here at Prairie Bible Church just in the last couple months. As we stepped forward, too, let's also not forget, and I apologize, Jesse, I didn't have a good picture. I had an ugly picture, but I decided not to throw an ugly picture up there. But Jesse and Stacia have joined us since our last church meeting, all-church meeting. And the awesome blessing that that's been to have their family join us and the development of worship, and now him pulling other ladies in to sing with Courtney and Mackenzie, and it's really been awesome that way. And then we're going to talk much more, but I think it's important to just put on the board of the building committee that's been formed, the things that you're going to hear about later in the service of great celebrations of what's been going on. And I want to hit on that as well. Any comments, questions about the celebration and what we've been doing and what's been great? Yeah, very good stuff. I think Tina, yes, is going to share with us some of the missions, goals that have happened in the last few months. Tina, do you want that? No.
I'm honored to get to represent the ministry team, and after hearing Pastor's sermon today, I think that as a church, we need to also reflect that it's a wonderful thing that as a church, we don't just take faith as a feeling, we're taking faith as an action, that we've decided to tithe, and that 10% of all of our giving goes toward different organizations that have a Christian-based value. So the giving that we've done year to date is listed up there, and that is 10% of what we've taken in, or nearly 10% of what we've taken in. Just to kind of give a little bit of context, if you look at it and group it, we've given about 45% of the giving has gone to meals or homeless and housing support throughout the area. We've given about 18% to camps for kids, about 18% to flood recovery, and 18% to health and medical support in the area. So not to give ourselves a pat on the back, but just to acknowledge that we've been blessed so that we can be a blessing to others. Who's up next?
Any questions for Tina?
you mind? Thank you very much. It matches up real nice, I promise. All right. Hey, I've been asked this morning to share a little bit with you about some of my goals in the next 3 months for the college ministry. We're still kind of in like the infancy stage. We're still kind of figuring out how to get started because this is something new for all of us here at PBC. So I'd just like to share some of my thoughts and how we can maybe move forward with this. The very first thing, this is already underway that we're going to do is meet and contact. So I'm in the process of scheduling a meeting with this guy I know named Jason Vanna of Ignite College Ministries within the next few weeks, probably as soon as next week. Jason's a good friend of mine. Before I moved here to Cedar Rapids, I lived in Monmouth, Illinois, and there's a college there called Monmouth College. Some of you may have heard of it, but there's a ministry called Ignite College Ministries there, and he basically, all on his own, broke into Monmouth College and started a thriving ministry there. So he knows this type of ministry inside and out. Craig and I are really excited to meet with him. I would also like to schedule a meeting with a good friend of Craig's, Lucas Blair, who is an experienced community college minister. So Monmouth College was a 4-year college. Kirkwood Community is a 2-year college, so that changes the game a little bit. It changes kind of some of the ways we have to approach the students, and as you'll see, some of our hiring is going to be affected by this as well. And a third contact that I have is Josh Troutman, who is actually currently at Kirkwood Community College, if I'm not mistaken. I have yet to get a hold of him, but that's something I plan on doing this week. All of this is just to get an idea of how do we do this? Like, how do we get started? How do we establish a presence on the campus? So that's step 1. Step 2 is post a job description. So Pastor Craig and I have been working, and we have co-created a job description for 2 college interns. We've already been approved to basically hire on 2 college interns. This description includes information such as duties they will perform, which will be in the areas of children, youth, and college ministry. So they're going to be real busy here at PBC. The hours that they will work, which is about 5 to 10, and their compensation, so how much they will make per month. I'm going to try to find the best platform to post this description. My inclination is that it's going to be online through some kind of a school portal. But again, I will know more about how to break in and how to post these kinds of things after I talk to Josh Troutman. And then step 3 is hire the interns. We've set a date. I would like to hire 2 college interns between the dates of August 9th and August 31st. I chose the date of August 9th because that's when classes begin. Craig and I were talking, and we felt it was best once they're already on campus, but not when they get too busy. Because early on in September, students have pretty much already chosen what it is that they want to do, and they're pretty well set. Some of them for all 2 years. They're going to be set in what they want to do. So that's why I set the August 31st date, so that we can get in and get the interns as soon as possible before they get busy, basically. And it is important to us that we select from among the student body of Kirkwood Community College, because as much as we care about the community college, these interns will probably care more because they have more at stake. They're more invested. They're actually students there, and they're going to know how to best reach other students there. That's why we take this very seriously. Those are the updates I have so far on kind of our thoughts and some of our steps that we're taking. Do you have any questions? No? Okay.
Thank you, Jesse. I'm going to just quickly go through kind of our financial update on our general fund. And this is a chart we've shown before. Hopefully it's not too confusing, but best place to start is kind of at the blue line, and that indicates our giving over time. And it starts there in January of 18 through the end of June. And the red line is our expenses. So you can see, in general, our giving has been well ahead of our expenses. Timing-wise, a few times it's maybe be a little bit lower, but in general, we're doing real well. And then the green line at the top represents what's in our checking account balance. And again, this is only for the general fund, so this is separate from the capital campaign. And then you can see what our monthly average giving there is, as well as our monthly average expenses. So we just wanted to give you a quick snapshot on that. Are there any questions on that before we have Randy come up and talk about the capital campaign? All right. We'll let Randy take it from there.
Thank you, Mark. Let's just go line by line here, I think is the way my man Mark has this figured out. So as you know, we've had phase one of a capital campaign. Our goal was $500,000. And the next line will give us some additional information. You may recall that we had an excess of $65,000 in our checking account, and we transferred that to the campaign. So we started off with that transfer. Then we've had gifts and pledge payments as of July 19th of $248,185. So we have remaining pledge payments of $172,265. And that means our campaign total came out to so far $489,400, and we know we have another gift in progress right now. So very good news on the campaign. We're only $10,600 short of reaching our goal, and we're, of course, quite optimistic we'll close that gap. So you might be interested to know from all those figures, one of the cool things is how much money do we have in the bank right now for the campaign. So that bottom line shows you campaign dollars in the bank. Again, that's the same date, July 19th. We have $315,983,000. So we're very pleased with that amount of money. Gives us a chance to think about some purchasing of land perhaps in the future, and we've got a really nice basis for that. Let's see, is there any other lines on that slide? We've done it? Okay. So I just want to follow that, Craig, by thanking you for sending me earlier in the week your message, your notes. And then Craig preached this morning when he said, God doesn't need your money. And I immediately sent a note back to Craig when he sent me that to say, but you should add on, but we do. Because you've done a wonderful job of sharing your assets with us. We're so thankful for that. We're very grateful for it. Phase one has gone really well. Of course, there's going to be a phase two. And again, that's where but we do need your money. And we'll give you an opportunity to pursue that shortly. Any questions about those dollar figures up there or the first phase of the campaign? All right, thank you.
So you're saving all your questions for the building stuff, I hope.
Can you switch to this one, and I can use that for questions? I don't know if it's on or...
So, there we go. Okay. In the building project status, want to just talk through, Tom talked earlier about everything we've accomplished kind of on the ministry side. You know, if you look at on the building side, it was just in March, which has only been a little over 4 months ago. We had 60 people in this room talking through what we'd like to see in a church building that would help us take the mission forward. And from that, the following week, we went ahead and set up our steering committee of 5 people. Been meeting since the 14th. Then we set up a much larger team of 20 people that are kind of our building review that meet with the steering committee every 6 weeks or so just to kind of give us feedback. We use them as a sounding board and also as inputs in. So there's 20 people that are represented on that. At the beginning of June then, we went ahead and selected our architect. We went through a process of sending out a quote to, I think we sent it out to a dozen people. We selected 4 of them that we were going to interview, and out of those interviews, we selected Solom Lang. We went through the same process for the general contractor, so the company that will actually be doing the building, and we sent out requests for feedback on our proposal. They came back. There was 4 people that we interviewed there, and we selected Rinderneck. So it's been a lot of activity here in the last 4 months. So I want to spend just a few seconds, and you've seen this slide before, but there's still a lot of questions on land, so we just wanted to re-highlight this again. And you can see there's really two sites right now that we're primarily looking at. I mean, if there's another one that God puts in front of us, we'll definitely consider that. But right now, we're pretty much down to two sites. On the left side of the map is 380. On the north side is Highway 30. And if you can kind of see the orange there with the P, that's Prairie Hill, so that's where we're at now. The one site, which we're calling the Jardine property, is in the blue. And that's, if you went out here to Kirkwood, took a right, and just kind of get up to the top of the hill, it's just right on the other side of where those apartment buildings and homes are at. And so that's one potential site. The other one is just, a little over a mile away from here. That's back on C Street, and we're currently looking at property there that's part of a farm field. So if you go out there, it's corn now, but it's just right on the north side of the farmstead, and it's Silversack property. So those are the two primary ones we're looking at. Again, this is a chart we showed earlier that just kind of gives some of the pros and cons of the two different ones. So what we're doing around the land is we decided not to purchase too early. We're letting our architect, and now we've got a civil engineer engaged, and they're going to bring us back information on those two sites. What's the pros, cons, what's the cost for each site to be able to develop it. And once we have that done, we'll start getting into some active negotiations to get the cost, what the true cost would be of those two sites, and then we'll bring that information to a congregational meeting to vote and let the congregation decide which of those two sites is the right place to go. And timing-wise, we're very fortunate that neither one of these sites we have to make an immediate decision. And they've both said that, hey, if there's anybody else that's active, they'll let us know, so we get the first rights to the ground. So we've taken it as kind of a luxury to be able to work through it the way we want to, rather than just going off and buying the land. But I guess I'd be interested in feedback if people think, if we're in a position in September, do you think we should go ahead and purchase at that point in time? I'm trying to get the questions going or some dialogue going here. So.
And we are recording this, so we'll
Yes,
just on
that's
video.
right.
So we try to get
and you
it
have to come
with
up to
the
the microphone to answer. No, just show of
thoughts?
hands. How many people think that we should go ahead and move forward on the land, as quickly as we get the information back, and take it to Congregational? I see one hand. Okay, I guess everybody else wants to wait. Okay, there's a few more. How many people think we should wait? Okay, that's it. All right. How many people are awake? So, again, we'll just kind of work through that. As we get the information, we'll bring it to the congregation. And
one thing I might mention, Mark, though, is just in preparation then is Mark is suggesting that it's a fast track, best case scenario, but we could come back in September with proposals saying, right now, nobody knows for sure whether we should buy it or wait, but we're saying that within 2 to 3 months, we could come back and say, we think we should go ahead and buy this. So I think we as a congregation, whether it's today or in the next few weeks, need to have those discussions to make sure we're all questioning or asking the right things and praying about what is going to be best, because it could be coming sooner rather than later.
okay, Judy's got a question. What's your question, Judy?
Hold on.
Okay, so Judy thinks we should ask the question one more time. Yeah, the thing is, we don't have to purchase it right away, but we know land prices aren't going to go down. We primarily been waiting because we wanted to get the civil engineer information, and we wanted to get the architect's feedback too, and then we wanted to get in some negotiations with the landowners. You can see right now from this chart, the land's expensive, right? But around Cedar Rapids, that's what it's running. We've benchmarked some others that are running over $100,000 an acre that are, in the general vicinity here. So now we believe we're going to be able to get it lower than this up here, but we won't know until we get in that negotiation phase. So as Judy said, so how many people think that it would be worthwhile for us to get some momentum going on our campaign and to go ahead and purchase the acres? All right, there we go. Good suggestion, Judy. All right. We got the crowd warmed up now. Oh, Judy's going to sing to warm the crowd up some more. Oh.
Okay, here I go. I don't like to talk in these. Where's the architect located? I've never heard of him.
So Judy's question is, where is the architect located? Solomon Lang, and they're right here in Cedar Rapids. They're the one that are up in Marion, Tom? Is that where their office is?
Old Marion Road.
Old Marion Road.
Northeast side of Cedar Rapids.
Yeah, and so that's a good question. Hang on just a second, Sherry.
And he, the main partner and founder, was born and raised in Cedar Rapids. It's a small firm of about 8 people, 8 to 10 people total. There's 2 partners that started it, but they are both Cedar Rapids people, born and raised. Correct.
Yeah, they know the area well. They've actually went out and looked at the 2 sites we have already. They were the best prepared when they came in and interviewed. They've also done a lot of churches in the area. So they've just got done with, the large Methodist Marian Church, which was an $8.5 million one, but they've also done lower cost ones. You may be aware they've done the Cedar Ridge Winery. That's right. Got to loosen the crowd up here. And they've also done, if any of you have ever been out to a wedding out at Usher's Ferry, the lodge, they've also done that out there. So, okay. Other questions?
Yep.
Okay. Sherry was first, so we'll let Sherry go first.
Sherry?
And the one thing about that mic, you just got to hold the mic kind of close.
Just flip back to the name of the architect.
Oh, okay. Yep, so the name of the architect, it's S-O-L-O-M Lang, Solom Lang.
We got another question or comment?
And if you want any more information about it, just shoot me an email, and they did a great presentation where I can give you as much information about them as you'd like. So another question?
So I have 2 questions real quick. I think these would probably be reminders from before, but on the land, you have 8 to 10 acres showing. Are we firm on what we think we need for land?
Yeah, so that's a great question. How much land do we think we need? So we've actually asked the architect and the civil engineer to come back and give us some recommendations. If we go to the Servicec land out on C Street, that's actually across the road from the city property. We think we'd be able to get sewer hookup, but if we can't, then we'd have to have some additional land for a leach field, as an example. So that's why we wanted to get some more information together. In general, we probably don't need 10 acres, but as we look for expansion, we want to be careful that we don't box ourselves in. We've talked with other churches that have said, make sure you buy enough land so that you're not landlocked and get forced into going to a totally different site if you need to grow. So we're trying to balance those 2 out, but great question.
Okay,
you got
then the
second
question is related to the other site that you've got that doesn't have city sewer services and things. What would be the investment in capital to make that be a functional site? And then is it potentially going to be on city services at a later date?
Okay. Yeah, so the Servicec Farm, which is out on C Street, like I say, it's if you know where Transamerica is at, it's right across the road from Transamerica out there on C Street. And that's one of the things the civil engineer will do is tell us what kind of capital we have to put into it in order to make it, that we could put a building there. Fortunately, both sites are relatively level, and we know the dirt work's an expensive part of it, so that should help. But the civil engineer is supposed to come back to us on August 8th and tell us, yeah, you can hook up to city water and city sewer, and this is what the cost will be, or no, you have to put in your own septic system, and this is what the cost will be. So we'll have a lot more of that information here in a couple weeks. Anything else, Paul? Okay.
Nancy.
Other questions?
Do either or both of the properties, in the past we talked about, maybe buy 5 acres and then give us the option down the road to buy 5 or whatever. Is that the case for either of these?
Okay, so Nancy has a good question in terms of, for these properties, would we have the ability to buy some of the land now and like a right of first refusal, buy some additional in the future? We know that we believe the Servicec, that may be a good possibility because it's all cornfield right now. And so that would be something that we'd go into that negotiation phase with them in August. The Jardine property, it's a little less likely, but not out of the realm. So the Jardine property, like I say, which is just half mile south of here, the person that owns it's actually got 32 acres there. And originally he said he would only sell all 32. He wanted to sell all one bunch. Once he heard that it was a church that was thinking about going there, he said he'd be willing to sell 8 to 10 acres. So, whether he'd be willing to do more than that, we don't know. We'll just have to get into that discussion, like I say, once we get some more information from the civil engineer. Good question. Other questions?
Over
Francis.
here.
That's a great question. Francis asked about the total project cost, and that's coming up here shortly. So it's a good lead in.
Hold on, Mark. Got a question over here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was interest in why you selected a general contractor now. Typically, one waits until you get a design package ready to go with specs and everything, and you go out and get bids from several contractors. So I just kind of
Yeah, so that's a great question in terms of, I mean, there's really two main different models, and I learned this too because I'm not a construction guy, but there's two basic models you have when you go to a building. One is you can, hire an architect or a designer, and then he'll go through the full process and design the full building and lay out all the specs, and then you'll take that information out to bid to a number of different contractors to see who comes up with the lowest bid or the best value bid. So that's called design, bid, build. That's one approach. The other approach is called design, build. And essentially what that is you go ahead and hire your architect like we did with Solomon Lang, but then you hire your contractor based more on their merits and how you think they could work with your team, and you get them involved way up front. And so they work hand in hand with the architect to make sure that you get, number one, the lowest possible cost, because they'll design things based on their knowledge of the cost of materials and give inputs back to the architect at that point in time, and it also saves an overall project time. So the one reference point I had, just to kind of make it simpler, is I was involved in my company previously, build a $12 million building downtown. And we used a company, and we went through the traditional design, bid, build. So we had the architect go through, and they designed us a beautiful building. And then we took it out to bid, and we ended up selecting somebody. And then the builder came back and said, the windows on the second floor, I can save you almost $100,000 if you shorten those windows up by a foot, because the architect specified custom windows. So we did that. But then the architect had to go back, and they charged us an additional cost because it was a change order we had on the original design. And so there's things like that, and there was a lot more examples like that. So architects sometimes can, they don't have all the inherent knowledge, or they're doing, things to the design, not necessarily, exactly what, and us being a simple, authentic church, we want to ensure that our building is simple and authentic. So we really thought establishing the partnership up front was the right way to do it. And Solomon Lang has worked with a lot of different churches, and they said they found that to be the best approach too. So we use that as an input also. That answer your question? Okay.
And I might throw in there as well, Renderneck is hired as a general contractor. They're going to manage the project and the construction. That doesn't mean that we don't get pricing for all aspects of construction. We're still going to get pricing for 2 or 3 different plumbers and 2 or 3 different electricians and different painters. So it's not just they're going to give us a price. And they will help us, and they're going to work with us. That the building committee then can sit down and they provide 3 different numbers from 3 different electricians, and they'll show us what those numbers are in those bids, and then we choose who we want to use. So there'll still be some bidding through the process. It's not like they're just going to give us what they give us. So make sure we all know that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, Renderneck said likely 80% of what the building cost will be subcontracted. And when that happens, as Tom said, let's say it's a plumber, there'll be 3 different, and we can say, hey, we want to make sure that you include this plumber because we know them or we've got some relationship. And then it's totally open book. So we get to see what all the bids are. Renderneck will give us a recommendation, but Prairie Bible Church will be the ones that actually select which subcontractor we'll use. So we believe that'll help ensure that we get the best possible cost through the process too.
Other questions?
All right, great questions. So next, I just wanted to kind of highlight, our process here real quickly. So back in March, from our vision meeting, we kind of took inputs, like say, from the 60 people who are here, and then, subsequent to that too, in terms of, okay, if we know that we want to start off simple as a congregation, we're a brand new congregation, we're not looking to design a big fancy church, and we know it can't be too large just based on the cost. So we kind of put together these phases. And so, inputs we got back from that vision meeting was, hey, we'd like to have a worship space for 300, a coffee bar. I just kind of highlighted some of the key ones. We said, fairly large classrooms and nursery. And then in the future, we'd go on to expand it. And this just shows a few other things that we said, it'd be nice to have multiple offices, but single office where, we could store stuff and double as pastor's office and, double as classroom. That's what we do. We wouldn't be able to afford a full kitchen right up front, That'd be something we'd do in the future. So that's kind of what we put together initially. And this information then went out to the people that we were currently at that, essentially the 12 companies that we sent out to select our architect. And what Solomon Lang came back with then, and they actually had this as part of their interview that they gave us at the end of May, was they said, hey, here's a potential look for a building. And if you can kind of, maybe a little hard to see, but on the clear right-hand side, there's a big stage there. There's seating in the worship space for 300, a big gathering space in the middle. They actually put 3 large classrooms that could hold 20 to 25 people in there. Restrooms, prayer room. It looked great, right? And 16,000 square feet. And then they showed us kind of the outside of it. And they said, this is an example of what it could look like. Now, again, this was part of the original proposal, so, this isn't a current rendering or anything. They really hadn't even hardly talked with us at that point in time. They just said, hey, here's just a possibility. And so, between the 16,000 square foot and the outside look, we thought, well, that looks pretty good. Maybe we don't want that much glass or quite that fancy, but it's looking pretty good. And then we said, after we had our first meeting with them, we said, can you just give us a rough cost on this? And so they did. And the rough cost was $4.5 million. And we said, yeah, I think we're going to need to do a little work on that. So what we've done since that point in time then is we've been working with them in terms of trying to scale back some of those initial phase 1 ideas. How can we get some costs out of it? So what they came back relatively recently to us was this floor plan. And if you can see, this is 8,300 square foot. So it's half the size of what the original plan was. The length of the building is 120 feet and the width is 70. And so just to kind of visualize what that is, in here, this room is 50 foot wide and 85 foot long. Or even better yet, if you think of the gym over there, it's 70 foot wide by 100. So if you walk out of here and go over to the gym when we're done, that's how wide the worship space would be. And then, this building would be 120 total, and the gym over there is 100. So that gives you an idea. So a decent sized space. It's not huge, but it's a pretty good sized space. You can kind of see that in the worship space, they're seating for 250. The idea is that maybe we'd have a glass wall in the back that would allow us for some overflow seating that has yet to be priced out or really looked at, but that was an option. We had some feedback from the vision meeting that it'd be kind of cool if the stage had a little bit of a round, so there was a little bit of an arc to where the seating is, so they've included that. The idea is the stage wouldn't go all the way across. We'd actually have storage space, so we utilize that some up in the front of the area. And then on the front of those storage rooms is where we'd have our screens. So we'd have 2 screens, one on either side. A lot of the cost, believe it or not, is like ADA stuff. So there has to be a ramp to go up to the stage. There has to be, the list goes on and on for all the ADA compliance pieces you need to have. Still the large gathering space. They took it down to a nursery, a single kind of office/meeting room, so we dual purpose that. Mechanical janitor room, a prayer room, and the restrooms. And just a couple things.
What was that?
Yeah, great question on the basement. So we actually asked that in terms of, can you maximize some of your space and your cost by going to the basement? And what he said is the cost of a basement is almost as much as the cost of a main floor, because you have to do, rather than just pouring concrete over dirt, you have to put special flooring in so it's strong enough. And then again, you get into all the ADA compliances. You got to have multiple exits out of the basement. You have to have an elevator out of the basement. He said a lot of places aren't going to basements now just because of the added cost.
Part of it depends on square footage. If you've got, if you're on a city lot and you've only got so many square foot of lot, you may not have a choice but to go to a basement and a second level, et cetera. If you can get an extra acre or two, our feeling from everybody is, it's just easier to be wider.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, and in the next slide, Paul, I'll show you some of the cost per square foot on those, because that's one of the things we did. The committees went out to 5 different sites and looked at them, as well as Solomon Lang has given us a bunch of data back on that. So other thoughts and inputs on this. So again, this is not what it's going to be. This is a potential that now the steering committee is kind of working with them to refine, and then we'll be getting involved with the general contractor to kind of go to the next level of detail.
Sherry's got a question.
Yeah, sure.
You can.
No, we don't have a picture of what this looks like on the outside because basically they haven't designed it yet. So what they've talked about was, go back here for a second. If we wanted to do something similar to this, like with you can kind of see the little, what do you call them, Tom? Overhangs or porches out to the side. They wondered if we wanted to do something like that to give it a little bit of a barn feel. There were some questions in our building review committee meeting that we had just recently about would we go to a steel roof to get long-term sustainability improved. So that might even give it a little more of a barn feel.
But in very general aspect, this one has the main entrance there with that tall peak. In our current concept, what it sounds like is that would kind of go away. And our main entrance would be on this end, the way the picture is. But it would be a peak, so we could do something similar to what that end is. But then this side would just all be the same roof pitch. Hopefully that helps make it a little bit simpler. But remember this one is, so the entry is on the left-hand side. If you go back to that outside picture. But here, you just take the middle out, kind of slide those together. That's what it would look like, but the entry would be over here, where there'd be a nice peak. As we talked about, you could have a cross on top. You could keep it open and have glass like that. That's some of those details we haven't worked out. But in general, the idea would be it'd be one barn shape or pole building with a peak running like this. Does that help answer the question?
There's a copy.
What's your definition of a little bit, Jolene? When people go camping and they have a little fire here and a pot, they consider that a kitchen. I mean, there's a lot of definitions, right? Mark, you can answer that one.
No, I think you're doing a great job, Tom. Why don't you just keep handling that one? Yeah, I mean, Jolene, we talked a lot about what we need to do for a kitchen, and it basically just got down to cost again. So we have a coffee bar there. Eric Reese is part of our steering committee, and so he's in the plumbing industry, and so he said, we put kitchen or a sink and stuff on the backside, in that mechanical janitor room. So again, it's a lot of details we haven't worked out yet, but right now we don't see that a kitchen is something that we could afford at this step.
Our hope is to get a little bit better than what we've got now, to have a permanent coffee bar and at least to have that set up.
Right.
The other thing that is not on here that nobody's asked about yet, and we'll get to there, is classrooms. I mean, there aren't real dedicated classrooms here just from a sheer trying to get down to the cost so that we can get something built. And ultimately, I don't know if it's right now, I want to get to your question, Cynthia, but the question is going to become, for all of us to eventually answer at some point, we're not there yet, but do we say, okay, we try to move forward and build this because we can to get into our own space, or we say, no, we want to back up, we want to wait till we can raise $4.5 million, and then we can have the classrooms and this and that and the other thing too. And that'll have to be a question at some point.
With regard to the kitchen, if you're not going to have any kitchen, but you are going to serve food to people, you will have to get the county health department involved so you don't break county health rules.
Okay, yep, good point.
So, and I didn't finish maybe on the classroom concept as well. Right now, the hope or the idea would be in that gathering space. We could buy some temporary walls, some movable walls, and you could auction or separate them off. Right now, the kids kind of meet in the hallways a little bit anyway, and they can move around, and that would be the idea, at least in the short term, for a classroom during service if we needed it.
When we're talking about the amount that we're going to be spending on the church, then what we're going to be spending on the land also, isn't that going to be quite a deciding factor when the price of one land compared to the other per acre was almost doubled?
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. I mean, that's a great point, and I think that's one of the advantages to actually, I'm glad we've held off on getting our land just so we haven't locked ourselves into a high price, but yet if we're able to make a decision, in September on land, then we'd know what was left over for the building. So I think working those closely together is important, and they're both great sites. What we're not clear on is, even though the Jardine property is expensive, if you don't know Michael Jardine, he's the CEO of Heartland Express, and they're a real philanthropic family. And so whether he'd be willing to donate some of it, that's all things that we'll get into. And there's tax advantages too if you're giving to a 501c3 like we are as a church. So there's different possibilities, but that's kind of what we want to do, is get all those factors laid out so that the congregation's got full knowledge of what the cost deltas would be between the two different sites, and then make a decision based on that. Yeah, Sherry. Okay, the street that leads us into the Jardine property, we believe we'd be able to get an entryway off Kirkwood, but again, the civil engineer will have to work with the city to make sure that's correct. And then there actually is another street. If you go back into that development, there's actually a stub of a street that would be right at the back of our property. So we'd actually have two entryways off there. The one you'd have to go through the development, but you could get there either way. So again, that civil engineer will tell us whether we can get one off Kirkwood, but I believe we should be able to. Great questions.
Here you go. I'm here, right here. There you go.
I was wondering, will there be any portion of this as a basement for classrooms?
So Francis wondered whether there'd be any portion of it for basement for classrooms. And, we saw one church that had some classrooms in the basement, but it didn't feel like a basement because they actually it was built into a side hill so you could walk out. So they also didn't have all the additional costs of another entryway. So right now, the architect has suggested we don't do a basement because it'll jack our cost up quite a bit. I mean, the elevator themselves is a big expense, and if you put a basement in, you have to do an ADA compliant large elevator. So that's one of the downsides to a basement. Any other questions? Okay. Well, let me just go on. Oops. So the other thing that Solom Lang's done on the right-hand side, you can kind of see this future expansion. So we said, hey, we want to make sure that we're not just doing this building. We want you guys also tell us how we'd expand, where we'd expand. I mean, we believe that we're being called to build a building, not for us, but for this whole area. And so it's really about how do we grow God's ministry. And we've used this before, but, from right here, Prairie Hill, there's no church within a 5-mile radius of here, which is, phenomenal. So there's a lot of potential in this area. So we believe we're going to grow in the future, God willing. And so we want to get the future expansion. And that little chart up there just shows one way you could expand. So as an example, the white box on the right-hand side there is phase 1. If you wanted to make the sanctuary larger, you could push out that wall and go that way, or if you wanted to say, well, let's create an all-new sanctuary, it could be that blue box or the green box. But again, you keep your entryway in the same spot, so it'd be in the same spot relative to your parking lot, and you'd still have that large gathering space you'd be able to reuse. So that just gives you a quick idea. And again, we haven't gone into any depth of, what's phase 2 or phase 3 look like, but they're just floor planning it so that we know that we wouldn't be landlocked, or if we had to put in our own septic system, we wouldn't want to put in a septic system in where we thought in the future we might be building the building, right? So just thinking through those things. And then just as a visualization of what this could look like, so I mentioned earlier this Usher's Ferry Lodge. This is one, again, that Solom Lang did. And so they said this is a lower cost option. So this is one potential that it could look like. So visualize this as looking into our worship space, and there's an altar up front, and the idea is we'll go with sealed concrete floors to keep the cost down there, but we'd have a lot of natural light. All they did here was they put rafters up, but they had the rafters stained, so it gives you kind of that barn appeal, that look, and you keep the cost down from not having to go to a fully finished ceiling. So again, this is just one idea. There's nothing that's set yet, but that just kind of gives you, I think, a good visual cue of what it could look like. Okay? All right. So I highlighted preliminary here because, we told them to bring the cost down. They brought the square footage down by half. What did that do to the building cost? I just want to kind of step you through. But again, these are very preliminary. So the architect isn't the one that's going to set the cost of the building. It's really the general contractor. So that's kind of this next phase we'll be going through. But just to give everybody an idea of what that space could potentially be, we just put a plug number of $500,000 in here for land. Could be. I mean, I'm hoping it'll be less. Could be more, but I think this is a good number to use at this point in time. Site prep. This is one that I was actually surprised how much it's going to cost. So site prep includes doing dirt work, and so everything's got to be level. The parking lot has to be almost perfectly level for ADA compliance. So this is the cost of all that dirt work. Water retention is a big cost that you have to do in Lynn County to make sure that your runoff is being handled properly. The parking lot, the sidewalks, the landscaping, all those things go into site prep. So they're estimating right now $300,000. Again, the civil engineer will probably give us another take on this, and then we'll actually take it out to bid so we'd know exactly what the cost would be. This is just kind of a plug number, chairs, fixtures, whatever's needed, $80,000. The architect general contractor fees, so they charge a percentage of the building cost. So we put in $180,000 here. And then just in terms of this building estimate, now this is based on $170 per square foot. Back to Paul's question about kind of benchmarking what some other churches have done. So if you start back in 2012, King of Kings, theirs was $225 a square foot, so quite a bit more expensive. Usher's Ferry Lodge, which he's kind of looked at there, and that was a real simple design. It was only 160 square foot. That's been 5 years ago. And then St. Lutheran in Ely, which is actually St. John Lutheran in Ely, which is actually one we toured, was $165 a square foot in 2017. So that just kind of gives you an idea of, this 170 is an estimate at this point in time. Again, the general contractor will come through and give us estimates back on that. But our job as a committee now is, how do we work these costs down? But we thought this was a good place to kind of center everybody about where we're at right now, what we're thinking. So questions on that?
What's the time frame on this? I mean, on the general contractor and the architect getting back?
Yeah, so Cindy asked what the time frame was on the architect and the general contractor getting back with us. So this coming Tuesday will be our first kickoff meeting with the general contractor, and he'll be starting to work through some of the costs then. And they won't be at the bid level, but Rendernecht has a lot of experience. That's actually one of the things we liked about them. They, of all the builders we talked with, they have a really good process in terms of estimating costs and working costs down. So this Tuesday, I think they'll have a little better idea, and then it'll just kind of get refined as we further refine, how many windows do we think we want, and exactly what is the entryway going to look like, and some of those pieces. Overall, we're hoping that, well, I shouldn't say we're hoping, we are planning that by October 1st, we'll have the building design done, the costing nailed down so we can bring it to the congregation. So we're moving pretty fast.
Other questions, comments? You want to throw Mark out yet?
Does this number shock people? Yes, no? Okay. Harold said definitely. I mean, it shocked me too, Harold. And, some of the, like I say, the first site prep, they said $500,000. That was the typical. And, so when you look at it, between the site prep and the land purchase, $800,000, a lot of it is all the codes you have to go through today, the ADA compliance pieces you have to go through today. Again, I'm hoping that we can get this cost down, but I want to just give you the information. We've went through, the architects we talked to first, everybody, and actually all the general contractors we talked to, estimated $175 to $225 per square foot. So, again, that's not at the detail level, but that's where everybody said everything's being built out now. Everybody said that the cost of materials have went up significantly in the last couple of years. So, and we heard, I mean, Mark Lenz is on our review board. He runs Lenz Heating and Air Conditioning. He said his costs are 10 to 15% higher than they were a couple of years ago. Eric Reese in the plumbing industry, he said his are in the mid-teens also. So costs have gone up for building and then just, in general, so.
Hold on, we get a question.
With the number that we're seeing here, have we kind of not looking at any other existing properties, knowing what this we're getting for our money here? Or is there just nothing out there?
Well, I think, when we first looked in this area, and it's been a year ago, what we found was around in this area, there is not very many used properties that have the high ceiling we need to be able to use from an AV standpoint and screen standpoint. That gives us the parking lot size that we'd need. That gives us some opportunity for growth in the future. So, clearly there is an option of saying, well, let's go see if we can, rent a place and move in there. We looked at those costs too in this area, and it was, I was astounded at how much it costs to rent an area too. So, we've been very blessed and we only pay $85 a week to use this space. And so we've been blessed, and that's, allowed us to build up some reserves. But in general, we haven't found anything that would meet our needs in this area.
I would maybe only just say, Ben, if anybody came to us and had a location that would work in the proximate area, we would certainly look at it. And we would bring it back to everybody. I think anybody, we're all in this together. If there is a location that you think maybe we should be looking at, we don't want to rule it out. That's the beauty of that. Other questions? Other comments?
Have you ever thought of starting out something like a Martin building and then, go from there? This seems really extravagant. I know things are high, but, if you've ever gone on Highway 13, they started out, that's what it looked like, a Martin building. And that church has just grown.
Yeah, so, Ellen's comment is, how about going to an all-steel building? And there's surely that, I assume that's what you mean, versus a pole barn type approach, right? Like an all-steel building. I think that's the one out on Antioch, out on Highway 13. Is that the one you're thinking of, do you think, Ellen? It's that Antioch church, is that the one she's? Okay, yeah, yep, it's a non-denominational church out there too. So we have asked that, and I guess we haven't ruled that out by any means, because Renderneck builds both of them. Solomon Lang's designed both of those. They, at this point in time, they said that they believe cost-wise this gets us closest to what we're looking for. But again, if we wanted to try to scale things back even further, we could do that, but we feel like we're kind of back. If the cost per square foot is the main way they're estimating it right now, 8,000 square foot seems like close to the minimum, unless we want to go to a lot smaller worship space. That's a possibility too. And if we did, then we'd need to go to multiple services. So there's still a lot of options. And again, the idea here is we'll try to work this number down from $2.5 million to get as low as we can, and then we'll bring it to the congregation, and for the congregation to decide how to move forward.
So this other question that as we move forward, we all need to be thinking and praying about. Again, there's a lot of thought that needs to go into this. That's why we were excited to be able to share it now and then have a few months to think about it. Whether it comes to picking land and the location we go and whether we spend more or not, on the type of building we build, on the look that the building has, a lot of this is going to come down, I think most of us would all believe, none of that matters. And I truly believe that. Yet the question is, as Mark has said multiple times, how we can minister in what God wants us to minister in this area. And what does it take to do that? And do we need to do a little bit more to achieve that goal for God or not? What I mean by that is we could go out in the middle of nowhere, put up a Morton pole building for Ellen, and we could do that for a pretty minimal cost. The question is that what Prairie Bible Church is called to do? Or are we called to center ourselves in this Kirkwood Prairie School District with a building that's inviting to get people to come in? We can minister to them anywhere. We don't need a building to minister them. But on the other hand, some people, if we can get them in the building, we can minister to them. And I'm certainly not saying we need a $4.5 million building. But hopefully you can understand the idea of a really basic pole building may be a turnoff for some people. Now, it may encourage some others, but we got to think about where we're going to be and how we do it. We don't have to buy either one of these land properties. We can go a lot longer, farther away for a lot cheaper. But is that the purpose? Is that what we're called to do and supposed to be doing? And unless there's comments with that, we sure can open it up. But otherwise, it's the idea just to keep thinking and praying about that of where God wants us and how he wants us to build. Well, they're recording it. Mark gets mad at me if I don't do this.
I heard what you said, Tom, and I respect that. I do think we've gotten totally away from the barn that we thought we were headed for.
And you're
Was
thinking,
that because of cost?
Are you thinking like the outside look of it? Is that what your thought is? Yeah. I mean, quite frankly, I think we've shown a couple times that Billy Graham library, with the barn look and the cost in the end. I haven't given up on that at all. So again, I think I kind of hesitated even to show this. This is not what we came up with. This was the architects came up with this even before they'd met with us for the first time. So this was based on their, what they read in the letter from us. So in terms of the outside view of the building, nothing's been decided. So the only thing we've really talked with the architect about is the layout of the internal side of the building, and we've talked with him a little bit about what the inside of the worship space could look like. We really haven't had any discussions with him on the outside. So, I mean, I'm hearing you say loud and clear, hey, we really wanted to keep with that barn look. And I guess my feeling is I don't think it's going to add much in terms of an outside barn look. And, we've even had some ideas about, well, on the inside here, these storage rooms, you have to have doors, could those be, sliding barn doors across the front? And could you I know Rocky's talked with me about, how about we use some barn wood on the insides or in the entry gatherway. So I think there's a lot of possibilities yet, but we actually haven't gotten to that level of detail.
I wouldn't mind asking, I don't know, what's a show of hands or nodding the heads. Sherry's, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but kind of disappointed we aren't very barnish. Is that fair to say? Are people, would you like to see more barn motif in what we've got? Okay, that's very, very helpful. That's why we're doing this. I mean, discussion, that's good feedback. Thank you. Other comments? Questions? Suggestions?
I know you guys said that there's not many churches within 5 miles. Right. So I feel like if you just a standard pole barn, all of us are going to stay. But if you want to invite more people in, I think that Sherry's comment was right. We need to make it more inviting. We need to make it, and if it means we have to save a little longer, I think we should. It's just my thoughts.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate that input. Just, I guess one quick question. I mean, do you guys like the looks of the inside of this, or does this look too fancy? Judy said, raise hands. She likes people to commit. Do people like the looks of the inside of this? So the outside, you don't like the looks, understand, we'll work on that. The inside, people like this. And again, I think, we could, what they've got on the side of the walls, they actually use the same inside as they have on the outside, but we could do something definitely different than that. We've talked a little bit about having probably not that much glass because we don't want it to be a distraction, but maybe more glass up over the top, maybe 10 foot up over the top of the altar area. So that's clearly the idea. And, we'd even talked about, do we want to have more of a lot of the new churches are going to more of this black box style where there's no windows, and it's more of a production where you do a lot with internal lighting, and pretty much got the feedback, no, keep it simple and authentic. We want to have some natural lighting, and we're not out to make a production. So. Oh, and that's a new one that's out in the country?
John.
Yeah, we didn't go and visit that, but I know I've been there. And Tom, you said you've been there, right?
John the 23rd, right between
John
Fairfax
23rd.
and
Yep.
Highway 30.
Yeah,
We've been in it.
I think the style, I know that's a more expensive church, internal finishes, but in terms of having it open, the one thing you'll see in our floor plan too is it's much wider. I mean, the churches that I'm used to, and a lot of the churches are kind of narrow and long. We're really going for the wide, and that St. John 23rd has that, and it also has the windows. Now, they have the advantage of being out in the middle of a field, so when you look out the windows, you see, prairie and things. So but something like that, I think, is absolutely.
We got a question over here. Cynthia.
Okay, one concern I have on a big open space. St. Mark's Methodist built a new addition. Big, beautiful open space, concrete finished floors. It was totally unusable when it was finished. The reason it was totally unusable was because of the acoustics. We had to go back, and the church had to go back and put in sound deadening acoustics, which was tremendously expensive because nobody thought about that up front.
So great point. I should have brought that up since I'm the audio guy, right? But
very good point.
So it's kind of cool because we asked Solomon Lang about that, and if you'll look in this, the entire ceiling is lined with acoustic panels. That's what they've used, and they said that it's. And so when I was walking around, I walked around, and you snap your finger and see how much. It was a very good space. And then last week we actually had Doug and Deb McDougall were here, and the night before they'd been out to a wedding, and I asked them, and they said they had a full music and DJ and stuff, and they said, yeah, the acoustics were great. So I think this approach will work. I also think we'll probably want to contract with somebody to come in and do our acoustics. We also got that feedback. A couple of churches we went to and said, yeah, they had to, after the fact, they had to go back and do some changes, and we'll want to do that up front in the design. Yep, great point. Yep, because it's not just the sound of it, but you got to be able to, understand who's talking so you don't get all the echoes going on.
The Solon Methodist Church did exactly the same thing. They built a fellowship hall with no thought towards the acoustics, and it is not impossible. It makes a great gym, but it makes a terrible sanctuary.
Yep. Right. Yeah, so we like I say, we'll absolutely make sure that's a part of the design and that we don't treat it as an afterthought.
It's kind of an expensive gym, isn't it?
Yeah, Kevin? Yeah, so Kevin asked whether these rafters were structural or just for looks. Now, these are structural. So they actually used, it's a clear span building, and Rocky, is Rocky still here?
He had to sneak out.
He just left. So if you don't know, Rocky's on, he actually worked for Renderneck for 32 years as a master carpenter. And so we're kind of using him as a reference. He's on the review board also. And so, he really liked the idea of the clear span and, the ability, even how you can build out in the future. So we're utilizing his expertise too.
Here you go.
Did that have anything to do with
You're done now.
the, did they take that into consideration when doing that? And can you hear that?
Yeah, the heating and air, we actually didn't ask that question in terms of, whether that interferes with acoustics or even just the visuals of it. I know in some of the other churches they did some different things. The one thing we heard at one of the churches we went to is make sure your mechanical rooms clear away from the worship space, because they said every time their furnaces turn on in their church, they can hear them. And so, it was interesting going around doing these site visits to get a lot of feedback. And there's several different companies, and we got some references that'll actually come in and model your space and do the acoustic analysis on it based on exactly what you're going to do inside. And I think we'll want to do that.
Mark's referenced it a couple times. We haven't actually brought it up here. The building committee of 5 people, we made phone calls to other churches to ask what they went through. People that had either built new or added on here within hopefully the last 3 to 5 years or so. Linda, was there 6 or 7 churches at least that we kind of had information on, we talked. Then we did some tours. Some of those churches, some other churches, and we're on 5 different tours, and we've got a couple others we may do, just to try to get some of that info. As far as heating and cooling, it's not much different than what we've got right here. You know, just the tubes up here, and you don't even hardly maybe notice them up here anymore. It's kind of a natural style. A lot of buildings and public spaces are going to that in some ways.
Does that make it more maintenance?
Cheaper to build because you got one roof instead of a roof and a ceiling. You know, a roof and a ceiling, you got basically almost 2 costs, and your heating and cooling's in between, whereas that's the roof. And so it's a little bit cheaper that way, and maintenance is obviously easier to get to if you need it. That's one of the main things with it. Mark's just flipping through some of the pictures.
Tom had put some of the slides together from the churches we went through, and so there was a lot of different ones. Like this church, you know, they 350. This is the one they've got the furnace right on the other side of the wall. I mean, and they didn't think about it, and they said it's a real distraction. There's not much they can do about it. You know, so we looked at stage sizes. You know, they went with some special monitors. So there's a lot of different approaches you can use, but it's been valuable to talk with the different churches just to see what they've done.
Other thoughts, questions?
Okay.
Go ahead, Mark.
We'll keep moving then. This is the last slide. So kind of next steps. As I said, this coming week, we'll be having our kickoff meeting with the general contractor, and they'll give us kind of the next refinement of costing. On the 8th of August then, the civil engineer comes in and talks with us about pros and cons of the 2 sites. From there, our thought is that we'll move ahead with some land negotiations. And then we can bring, in September, the decision to the congregation, hey, do you think we ought to buy now? What do you think of these 2 sites? Should we wait? Should we consider another one? So again, that'll be a congregational decision. And then 1st of October, we'll be able to bring to the congregation, here's exactly what the proposal is for the building, inside, outside, and all the cost. And again, that'll be a congregational decision, whether we want to proceed. If the decision is to proceed, then we'll go into a fundraising campaign of October through December. And, you know, essentially, this is kind of the tough part, is because we've pretty much decided as an admin council we're not going to make Prairie Bible about money. And so it's really, we'll get to the end of December and we'll see if we have enough money to move forward or not. And it'll be, I mean, up to the congregation, but ultimately up to God whether being called to move forward. And we're going to use this approach that was suggested to us of this kind of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So let's say the building cost ended up being, I'll just use a number, 1.8 million. Let's say that's overall. Then the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 means before we kick off the building and start, we'd have to have $600,000 in the bank. We'd have to have $600,000 in addition pledged, and then we'd borrow, the remaining amount. So again, we don't want to get into heavy debt. We do not want this to become about money, and so it'll just be primarily, where we're at the end of December. We'll make our decision, and I mean we can continue meeting here. Tom showed early all the amazing things that Prairie Bible is doing to date, and there's nothing wrong with that. Or we can look at other options. This is just, the path God's been opening the doors for us, and we'll see where we're at the end of December time frame. But I think it's pretty exciting. I mean, there's a lot of neat stuff, and I think we're really seeing things come together. So the idea then is if we're in a position at the end of December, then we'd break ground in spring, and our first service would be in Thanksgiving.
Do you notice he didn't put Thanksgiving of what year on there?
Other
Anything
questions?
Else?
Again, the congregation, we're looking for inputs every step of the way. There won't be any dollar decisions made other than through a congregational meeting and vote. So by no means has there been anything solid here. We're just moving through the process right now. Just so you know, I mean, the steering committee is made up of Tom Hughes, myself, Eric Reese,
Phil Hengst.
Lynn
Phil
Lynn
Hengst and Linda Anderson.
Yes. Okay. And then Craig's been real integral on the meetings too. So that's one. And then we've got the 20-person steering review committee that's been invaluable. So, all right. And like I say, if you got any other questions, feel free to ask, and stay tuned for further details.
You want to let Randy close in prayer before
yes.
we leave?
Judy, I'm glad you asked for that show of hands. And I thought about that while I was in the back of the room, and I know why people were reluctant. Because the last time I remember having a congregational meeting and Tom Hughes and Mark Steffens asked for a show of hands, and we wound up in a machine shed right after that.
Careful what you ask.
So I get the reluctance. Thanks, everybody, for attending. We really appreciate it. Again, echo Kevin's thoughts. The steering committee's done a tremendous job. We've got a lot to be thankful for there. Let's stand for our closing prayer. And if you can, just scooch together, reach across the aisle. Let's join hands in a show of unity as we reach up in prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for Prairie Bible Church. We thank you for the blessing you've given us over several months now. And we do think back to our humble beginning in the machine shed, and we give you thanks for that. And that helps us remind us who we are. And most of all, as we turn our thoughts to you, it reminds us what we're about. So we thank you for the work of the steering committee. These are exciting ideas. These are challenging ideas. We'll have some differences of opinion, but just as we're united in prayer now, we'll be united with you and following the plan that we're confident you have for us. Father, thanks again for the report we had earlier. So many things have happened in a positive way already at Prairie Bible Church. We certainly feel your presence. We feel your blessing, and we trust in you, Lord. And we thank you so much for sending your son Jesus to lead the way. So it's in his name we pray this morning, asking for our safety as we go on about our ways today, and as we look forward to returning in this place again in a week from now. And all God's people said, amen.